Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Wednesday, the 21st of February, 2018. And this morning I'm still at the Mission Springs Protection Camp. And today, our surfer of 2 days ago will hopefully be in court. He was offered the opportunity of release from police custody yesterday afternoon, but he elected to reject the restrictive bail conditions that the police wanted to release him with. And of course, this is a classic tactic to attempt to remove activists from the front line. It's totally disproportionate. Obviously, it has legal hold if they are accepted. So Lance has elected to appear before a judge in an attempt to get the bail conditions lifted. Now, there was an attempt to get him into court yesterday afternoon, but unfortunately the court schedule was pretty full. So he's back there sometime today, and hopefully he'll be back at the camp later today, this evening. He certainly had a tremendous impact, galvanising the support at Tinker Lane. And it has to be said that Tinker Lane right now is very much the front line here on the eastern side of the Pennines. Of course, Third Energy, or BARCLAYS Bank, trading as Third Energy, are in the process of removing all of their equipment from Kirby Misperton, having failed, as we knew they would, any analysis of their financial status. But meanwhile, it seems that the industry itself is in absolute disarray. And in fact, they are now turning on each other. And this is really no surprise. This has, been somewhat inevitable, especially as each of these companies realizes that they do not have sufficient financial resources to be able to take on the full potential liabilities of exploiting an unconventional well site. So they farm it out. So you have a lead player, but the lead player may only hold 30% even, or 33%, and then you've got the other players holding a lesser amount. And of course, if you've got two players holding a similar amount, maybe one 33 and the other one 30%, then obviously the one that's holding the 30% doesn't necessarily always get as much input as they think they should have. And then when the lead player does something to cock things up, as they will, then obviously the infighting begins. And so, when we saw a couple of days ago that Angus Energy were starting to have or express their concerns about the way in which UCOG had managed the operation at Broadford Bridge, then it was just a case of, the blue touch paper had been lit, and then wait for the fireworks to go off. And sure enough, they have. And all hell has broken loose. And yesterday, the UCOG stock price took a dramatic dump. It's still not down to the level that it should be at, which of course is basically barely zero. But some £50 million was wiped off the market capitalisation of UCOG yesterday. And just to put this in perspective, back in September of last year, the mug punter market, the small investor, responded to the Stephen Sanderson bullshit that he'd been pumping out, and the stock price ramped up to 8.4 pence, which is way above where it should have been. And of course, anybody who sold 8.4 pence then probably made a significant killing. And it'd be very interesting to see if any of the officers and directors of UCOG actually took advantage of that. Because here we are, basically 6 months later, and not even, and the stock price tanked yesterday to less than 2p. Now, it tended to wallow around about that period, and of course they brought in David Lenegas, the arch bullshitter, to try to pump up the market value. He's the guy who is credited with, of course, announcing the Gatwick Gusher, which got national headlines. So he achieved his goal in that respect. And of course, the mug punters flocked to put their life savings into the Gatwick gusher. Well, you know, it was nothing more than a dribble. And despite what UKOG and anyone else claims from these exploratory wells in the southeast of England, the likelihood is that they are never going to be anything more than a little dribble. So even with incontinence, they're never going to be anything more than that. So, you know, we've got this feud going on between Angus and UKOG. And if you go on to the UKOG stock chat forum, and these are very, very entertaining websites where the small investors spend their days watching to see if the promise of this time next year you'll be millionaires is being realized. And of course, in reality, you know, whenever you hear anybody promise that kind of a result, then you should actually be looking at the real truth behind that statement, which is that this time next year you'll be destitute. Because that's what happens, unfortunately, is happening with many of the people that have invested in the unconventional hydrocarbons industry in the UK over the past few years. And to see these sad, unfortunate mug punters turning on each other on the stock chat forums and turning on the chief executives of these companies is, dare I say it, perversely entertaining. And, you know, if you're even considering investing in these companies, then you must spend some time on the stock chat forums and looking at what those who have already lost their shirt and more are saying about these companies. And of course, this is pretty much the same everywhere else. I mean, at Quadrilla, their primary two financial backers, AJ Lucas, which is an Australian company, and Centrica, and their stock price, it really isn't looking too healthy either. I mean, AJ Lucas back in 2013 was trading at $1.50, that's Australian dollars, $1.50. Now it's down to 38 cents. Now, you know, that's not quite the same sort of level of drubbing as iGas has taken, more of that in a second, but nonetheless, it's a pretty serious drubbing. And of course, Centrica, back at the same time, their stock price was over £4. In fact, £4 and 2p at the time, and now it's down to 1.30 and falling. And as I've mentioned previously, Centrica are losing retail customers hand over fist. They're losing retail customers at the rate of about 750,000 a year. So each year, or for the past few years, every year around about the middle of the year, Centrica have offered a profits warning, which has been primarily related to the loss of their retail customers. And I think you should expect the same again this year, because as more and more people start to wake up to the fact that Centrica is one of the prime financiers of Quadrilla, who are still desperately trying to reach the terminal depth of their well at Preston New Road, 14 months into a 6-month project. Not very good, lads, is it? But without the Centrica funding, you're going to struggle even more. And so Centrica have a big choice to make. Do they keep hemorrhaging customers, and especially those customers who realise that they are the funders of this abomination in Lancashire, or are they going to turn the corner, divest of that to some other mug company, mug investment team, and focus on their real core business? Well, we'll see what happens. And of course, iGas, you know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, no, 4 years ago, it was January 2014 when we were at Barton Moss, and it actually looked like they might just get their bit in the ground and be able to do a test frack at Barton Moss. Well, that ain't going to happen, is it? And iGas, of course, are no longer really that interested in Barton Moss, although, as with Wickington, just to the north of York, they haven't gone back to put the land back to how it should be. In fact, at Wiggington in North Yorkshire, thanks to Dave Maris and the video he's put up on Frack Free TV, you can see that the well site is just a fenced off area, but there's a tree growing out of the cellar. So, you know, this is the way in which a company maintains an abandoned well after just 8 years. Imagine what it's going to be like after 28 years or 58 years. And potentially leaching rogue hydrocarbons into the environment. So iGas have got at least 2 wells, now potentially 3 at Ellesmere Port, and there's probably others, that they've just left. So, you know, shouldn't they be forced to go and fulfill their commitments of reparations in these locations before they try and churn up here at Misson Springs and just down the road at Tinker Lane? Well, you know, back in 2014, in the hazy days of David Cameron and George Osborne talking about the green energy that fracking was going to bring, yeah, seriously, where the stock price was over, well, it hit £1.50 basically, or just under £1.50. But of course, since then, the iGas stock has been refloated with 1 stock for every 20 of the old stock. So what was £1.50 is today, or would have been today, £30. But the stock is nowhere near £30, it's 77 pence. So by comparison with £1.50, that's less than 4 pence. So why would you throw your money into this black hole? And I actually want to refer anybody who's thinking of getting involved financially in this industry, and you should actually look no further than the website guerrillainvesting.co.uk. And if I can read as the rain falls on my screen here, but wipe it off a bit, let's see. But there's a great article from November of last year. Now bear in mind that this is just as all eyes were on Kirby Misperton, because Third Energy had got the kit onto the well site, and on November the 8th they submitted their final application to Greg Clark, the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. They submitted their final application to FRACK. Well, as we now know, of course, Greg Clark saw the light and refused to sign off on that, although he did acknowledge that Third Energy had met the 13 technical criteria. But so what, when basically you're in such a financial mess that the first thing that goes wrong, you cut and run and leave the taxpayer or the local authority, still the taxpayer, to mop up the mess behind you. But back in on the 15th of November last year, so a week after Third Energy had submitted their application, whether it's his real name or not, but Dan Levi, writing on guerrillainvesting.co.uk, penned an article titled UCOG, Angus Energy and the Liars Now Exposed in Full. Lenegas and Bell sold all their stock. It reads, "It is with great guffaws of laughter that I pen this epistle to the United Kingdom Oil and Gas and Angus Energy mug punters. Today, as foretold by yours truly, Dan Levi, we had the super duper news of a £10 million death spiral placing, as well as an update on the billions, I tell you billions of oil," quoting Lenegas, "wheeled basin fantasy perpetrated on the dumb and undereducated mug punters. Not forgetting the likes of other well-known bullshitters other than David Lenegas, the liar Andrew Calamity Bell. Both sold up a long time ago while exhorting the mugs to pile in, as it was billions, I tell you, billions of barrels of oil. Now let me educate the mugs. If David Lenegas and Andrew Bell really believed their ridiculous claims, they wouldn't have sold, would they? A simple statement of fact, and it's self-evident. The wheels have well and truly come off at UCOG and Angus Energy. After all the ramtastic David Lenegas lies, the truth has finally landed at the erstwhile Broadford Bridge gusher, and landed with a big bang. 370 barrels of completion fluids and a £10 million death spiral finance placing. The last time I checked, there was no market for completion fluids. And of course, there will be no promotional video of them pouring completion fluids into bottles. Aussie scumbag and liar extraordinaire, Captain Ramtastic David Lenegas, has as his modus operandi left the building. A burning building. Lenegas sold all his warrants and probably every single share, A quick check of Captain Ramtastic tweets and promotional videos should leave you in no doubt as to the duplicity of a man telling people there's enough oil to keep the lights on in the United Kingdom for decades, which he sells out of his discounted stock and warrants into the liquidity orchestrated by his constant ramping. Of course, you, the mugs, are left holding the Lenegas Turkish delight. It goes on. It goes on. The British Geological Survey tell you that the billions, I tell you billions of barrels of oil is a pipe dream that could never be extracted. And even if fracked is not financially viable and politically disastrous, and there's only one way it can go. That's to its logical conclusion. Exposed as a piss-poor bread and butter drill at best. Of course, those that have foolishly chosen to believe the corporate scammers over world-renowned geologists like Professor David Smythe are now even posting such utter shite that they really shouldn't be allowed out on the street without two men in white coats following discreetly behind them. However unpalatable the truth is, you can always rely on this site and my good self, that's David Levi, to tell it like it is. While we are all still waiting for the Angus Energy to explain to the mugs just why their 10,000, 1,200, 1,400 barrels of oil a day isn't going to manifest. So that's guerrillainvesting.co.uk. So the bottom line is, Theresa May, it's time for you now to show some serious leadership. Greg Clark showed you what it is to be a politician with real commitment and conviction. And despite the pressure, and we know there was a lot of pressure on Greg Clark to sign off on Third Energy's application to frack, but he did the right thing. Now we can articulate and speculate that much of that motivation was due to his concern about his political future. But whatever, he did the right thing. Now, you're losing the plot, Theresa. You know, you're basically out of control on the Brexit. You're deliberately destroying the National Health Service. You're forcing more and more people into poverty. So are you going to add to that legacy of destroying the landscape of this country by pushing ahead with an agenda that's not even yours? It's Cameron and Osborne, and they only got into it because they were pushed into it by Lord John Brown, who quietly exited stage left a few years ago, and from his chairmanship of Quadrilla when he realised that this donkey was going nowhere. It's time for you, Theresa May, to help the small investor and pull the plug on this insidious industry now. I think you're doing your best right now to leak all of the information that has come into the public domain, or is in the process of coming into the public domain, by getting people to realise that there's nothing good about the unconventional gas industry. And you know, my thanks to the Tap blog for picking up on this campaign and helping to spread the word and encourage people to do their own research, because you know, there is nothing that we have put out on these morning broadcasts, and there is nothing that the anti-fracking community claims about this industry that isn't supported by the irrefutable evidence that is in the public domain, despite the best efforts of the politicians to deny the existence of all this evidence, and to deny the horrendous experience of those who have the misfortune to live in a sacrifice zone. So come on, Theresa May, show some real leadership. Sadly, I won't be holding my breath. And sadly, I think it's down to the burgeoning anti-fracking community to do what it's been doing now for over 5 years. And that's to continue to expose the lies and the deceit and the obfuscation that surrounds this industry and the politicians who support this industry. And one can only hope that if this industry does get a foothold, then the people who live in those areas that will be impacted and the future generations that will suffer from all of the negative health impacts that that industry brings will be compassionate in the way in which they treat those that have perpetrated this abomination. So the sun's rising here, hopefully the clouds are going to clear. We do have a good forecast today, so you know, we're going to be cracking on with some work here at the Misperton Springs Protection Camp. Obviously a number of other members of the camp are down in Mansfield today, and of course there are others who will be at Chesterfield, where the manager of Marriott's in Chesterfield is in court for assaulting a protector. And as I said yesterday, you know, the police claim that, and some of the MPs have claimed, that the anti-fracking campaign has not always been peaceful. And sadly, that is true. But it's not been peaceful, not because of the anti-fracking community, but because of the behaviour of the police, the gratuitous aggression demonstrated by the police, and also the aggression and violence shown by those who are on the corporate payroll and need to know that they are under scrutiny like never before. So thanks for joining me this morning, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow morning. But meanwhile, go on to the Stock Chat forums. Just pump in iGas Stock Chat Forum or UCOG Stock Chat Forum, and watch the meltdown that's occurring as the small investors realise that they have been duped. You have a great day, and I'll catch you with you tomorrow morning at 8:30.